Do you want to attract birds to your yard or your garden while also growing food for you and them? And in this video, I'll give you an easy way to grow 5 crops so that you can feed birds, attract birds, and maybe even feed yourself with these crops. And the 5 crops that I want to focus on are flaxseed, millet, sunflowers, peanuts, and corn. And these are 5 easy crops to grow in your garden. You don't need a big space. You could do it in about a 10 by 10 foot bed. And stick around and I'll explain the whole process of how to grow it and when you plant each seed. Cool. So before I get into the how of this garden bed for birds, I want to explain the benefits of it. And not only are you attracting birds to your garden, but you also attract other wildlife and basically improving the ecosystem and biodiversity of your yard or your garden. And another reason is that it's a sustainable and cost-effective way to feed birds and attract birds. And it's also just a fun backyard project with some possible edible bonuses for you as well. So the location of this bed is actually very important. And all of these crops thrive in full sun, so you want to find an area in your yard that receives at least 6 to 8 hours of sunlight per day. I would just find the area that gets the most sunlight in your yard. Just make sure it's not shaded. And you want to plant these seeds in soil that's well draining and full of organic material, like compost. And for the size of this bed, I would recommend at least a 10 by 10 foot bed, but obviously bigger will yield you more seeds, which will bring more birds to your yard. And just in terms of planting the garden bed, you want to make sure you plant the sunflowers and the corn towards the back of the bed so they don't shade out the flax, the peanuts, and the millet, because those are lower growing crops and it can possibly limit the growth of those plants. So now you know where to plant, and now I want to get into when to plant each crop because they're all a little bit different. And the only plant that you can grow early in the early spring when it's still cold out before your last frost is flaxseed. So you can actually plant flax seeds in the early spring, March or April, depending on your climate, even before your last frost. So that's what I would recommend for flax. And then for sunflowers, peanuts, and corn, you want to wait till after your last frost when the soil is at least 60 degrees Fahrenheit. And then you can direct sow those seeds into the ground. And with peanuts, they take a little bit longer. So if you have a shorter growing season, I would encourage you to start the peanuts indoors about 5 weeks before your last frost. So it'll give a long enough season to get a big enough harvest of peanuts. And then millet, you want to plant a little bit later after your last frost when the soil is at least 65 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit. And then you can direct sow millet into the garden bed. Okay, so now you know where to plant, when to plant, and now we'll get into how to plant each seed because they're all a little different. And for flaxseed, you could pretty much just scatter it on the surface. You want it at about a 1/4 inch deep, but I'd recommend you surface sow it and just gently cover it and keep it watered. And it should germinate within a few weeks after scattering those seeds. And for the sunflowers, you want to plant them about 1 inch deep and about 1 foot apart so they have room to grow. The peanuts, you want to plant at least 1 inch to 2 inches deep and keep those plants about 8 to 12 inches apart. The corn, I would recommend about 1 inch deep and at least 12 to 18 inches apart. And the millet, I would sow it very similar to the flax seed, about 1/4 inch deep. You could just scatter it across the surface of the soil and just keep it moist and it'll germinate. Okay, so now you know how to plant it, and now I want to give you a few tips to improve your success of your birdseed garden. So I would recommend using high quality compost mixed into your soil before you plant so these plants have access to quality nutrients, microorganisms, and fungi in the soil to grow to their fullest potential. And you want to keep the soil moist for most of these crops, except for peanuts, because peanuts are a root crop, so if you overwater them, the roots will rot and the peanuts will rot. So all the other crops you could keep the soil moist, don't overwater them, but for peanuts, make sure you don't keep the soil moist. You want it to dry out because they are a root crop and they require slightly drier soil than the other 4. And you may see birds in your garden eating some of the seeds early. Just let them do it because they're not really a pest because you're growing it for them. So ideally you wait till all the plants are finished and you can harvest the seeds and then put them in a bird feeder. That brings us to the harvesting. And for harvesting, the flax seeds should be ready in about 50 to 60 days after germination. And you know they're ready to harvest when you shake the plant and the seeds will rattle in the seed pod. Then you could harvest them, dry them, and give them to your birds. And for the sunflowers, you want to wait about 90 to 120 days until the sunflowers are ready. And you'll know the sunflowers are ready when the seeds will start to harden in the plant, and then you can cut the head off of the sunflower, dry it, and store it, or give it to your birds right away. And the peanuts will take about 100 to 130 days, and you know they're ready to harvest when the leaves will turn yellow and die back. Then you could dig it up and you'll see the peanuts under the soil, and you could just dry them, store them, however you want to do it with peanuts. And the corn will take about 60 to 100 days until you can harvest it. You want to make sure you dry the corn when it's on the stalk, which will make it easier to process. And then you can give it to the birds. And last but not least, the millet will take about 60 to 90 days, and you'll know it's ready to harvest when the stalks turn a golden color. And then you can dry it, store it, give it to your birds in a feeder, however you want to do it. But that basically goes over all 5 crops, how to plant them, how to harvest them, when to plant them. So now you should have enough information to go out and grow your own birdseed garden. You can honestly just let the seeds fall to the ground and the birds will get them on their own, or you could save them, store them, put them in a bird feeder, however you want to do it. The world is yours. I hope this was helpful. If you need any more help, just leave me a comment. Have a great day.